Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad to have you all here with us today. This is the third and last week of the Northern California College Promise Coalition's Financial Aid webinar series, and we're so glad to have you with us today. First, let me just introduce the webinar and the series. My name is Meredith Curry. I go by Mer, pronouns she, her. I'm in East San Jose, California, and I'm the executive director of NCCPC. We are a network with a collective impact approach, bringing together leaders, practitioners, and resources to share leadership over college access and success efforts in the Northern California region to transform communities. We believe that together we can change the trajectory for tens of thousands of Northern California students. Collectively, our now 33 members serve over 58,000 high school and college students across the 9 Bay Area counties, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare. And we truly appreciate the leadership and thought partnership of our steering committee, champion and advocate members, and our advisory council, which includes the California Community Colleges Chancellor Eloy Oakley, and David O'Brien, Vice Chancellor of Government Relations. You can learn more about our membership and advisory council on our website. Be sure to also check out the other sessions that we have in store for you. This is the last week. We have 2 more webinars on Thursday. We just want to say also thank you. We're extremely grateful for the partnership of the California Community Colleges, the University of California, the Cal State, Immigrants Rising, Money Think, and Nadja Jepson of College Track. Stay tuned for a future announcement about a presentation from the California Independents. And before I introduce our special guest today, NCCPC is excited to be a partner of the California Community Colleges to support student enrollment. The California Community Colleges, as our guests will share, offers access to more than 200 career education programs and financial aid to help students reach their goals. And you can learn more at icangotocollege.com. And so with that, I'm excited to introduce our fabulous panel today, starting with Dean Gina Brown, Dean of Educational Services and Support. Gina has over 20 years of experience administering higher ed financial aid programs. She joined the Chancellor's Office in 2018 and currently supports a variety of areas in the Educational Services and Support Division, with a focus specifically on financial aid, basic needs, and equity programs. Prior to joining the Chancellor's Office, Gina was with the California Student Aid Commission, managing the Cash for College and Chafee grant programs, and was the financial aid coordinator at Evergreen Valley College for 10 years. Welcome, Gina. We're also excited to have Anafe Robinson here with us today, Director of Financial Aid Scholarships, Veterans, and Foster Youth Programs at LA Pierce College in Los Angeles County. Anafe has over 30 years of financial aid experience, holds a master's degree in business administration and technology management, and is currently the president of the California Community College of Student Financial Aid Administrators Association. I won't say that acronym, that's a long one. Anafe has the honor of being one of the select few to hold the title of Certified Financial Aid Administrators in the US, and is credentialed in several, another acronym, National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. Welcome, Anafe, glad to have you here. And Sean Domingo is the Director of Financial Aid at Ohlone College. Welcome, Sean, in Fremont, California. He has been in financial aid for 18 years and has worked for various types of institutions, from proprietary 2-year to 4-year public, 4-year private, and community college. He currently works with the California Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators as the Access and Diversity Rep, as well as a trainer, as the volunteer chair for WASFA, and has lots of other experience, including a trainer with the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, working with their Diversity Toolkit Committee. So we are so excited for all of the incredible experience and expertise that will be shared with you today. Note that when they're done with their presentation, we'll have a Q&A at the end, and we hope that you'll complete the exit ticket before you leave. That way you can let this great panel know how they did. And you can type questions in the chat at any time, and I will help support that Q&A. So without further ado, thank you to our speakers for joining us. You now have the floor. I'm going to go ahead and switch the presentation and start sharing that for you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you for having us all here. So once we get our slides going, I just wanted to include a few slides, provide some context, and to paint the overall picture of financial aid at California community colleges. Next slide, please. The entire community colleges system is guided by the Vision for Success. While there are 6 specific vision success goals, the point is clear: making sure students from all backgrounds succeed in reaching their goals, improving their families and communities, and eliminating achievement gaps once and for all. Efforts to achieve the goals are guided by the core belief that colleges should simplify paths to educational goals and help students stay on those paths. Efforts are focused on student voice and choice, universal design, and high-touch intervention, and always prioritizing continuous improvement. Next slide, please. To help fulfill the vision goals, the Chancellor's Office has identified 3 social determinants of educational success: financial stability, health and mental health, and support networks. Using the social determinants framework as a basis for student services helps clarify problems and obstacles and maximize resources. Financial aid is a vital component of the financial stability social determinant. Maximizing financial aid awarding and packaging is just one way financial aid administrators contribute to overall student success. The work financial aid offices are doing is making such a difference in the lives of so many Californians. In recent commentary in Cal Matters, written by Lieutenant Governor and member of Board of Governors Eleni Kounalakis and our very own Chancellor Eloy Ortiz, they discuss a new analysis. It's titled "The Economic Value of the California Community College System." And it shows the economic and social benefits our community colleges and why we need to invest in students. The report assesses the impact of California community colleges as a whole on the state of economy and the benefits generated by the colleges for students, taxpayers, and society. Next slide, please. So let's really kind of start talking about what we're here for, right? Awarding and packaging. The terms awarding and packaging are often used interchangeably. In awarding, when you see documentation, awarding usually refers to manually offering one financial aid type or award at a time to a student. Packaging refers to awarding multiple awards at one time to create a whole financial aid package for the student. Financial aid packaging involves employing strategies to distribute sometimes limited financial aid resources to qualified students to attend the school of their choice. The packaging process combines various types of aid from federal, state, institutional, and private entities to help meet the financial needs of college students. Rules for packaging some federal forms of financial aid are different from the rules for packaging non-federal financial aid. Next slide, please. I wanted to kind of give you, the audience, an overview of the types of financial aid that's available at California community colleges. There are well over 40 types of financial aid available. I've listed them all here. I won't read them all. And you can find types of aid at most community colleges. But what's missing are the other sources of campus-based aid that can vary depending on the campus. Next slide, please. To provide a little bit of additional context, I would like to provide a summary of total financial aid packaged and dispersed by all 115 community college financial aid offices. Please note that I added dispersed because not all packaged financial aid is actually dispersed. If in the case of if a student decides not to attend or they attend a different school, they may have been packaged, but the aid wouldn't be dispersed. So here, there are generally 3 funding sources of the various types of financial aid. We've got federal, which includes Pell Grant, federal work study and loans. State funded, which includes Cal Grant, the California College Promise Grant, also known as the fee waiver, and various categorical awards. And lastly, there are some privately funded, which is mainly scholarships and some work study programs. But as shown on the chart here, more than $2.9 billion was packaged and dispersed for the 2020-21 award year. And of that amount, 61% was federal aid, and the rest was state and privately funded. Next slide. So there are 5 major types of aid. We've got fee waivers, grants, work study, loans, and scholarships. Fee waivers, grants, and most scholarships are considered gift aid, which typically does not have to be paid back, while work study and loans are considered self-help since these types of aid have to be earned or repaid. As you can see in our system, as shown by the chart, the vast majority of aid is in the form of grants, followed next by fee waivers, with loans, scholarship, and work study quite a distance behind. Next slide, please. The last breakdown I want to show you is that of gift aid. Again, as you'll see, the Pell Grant makes up the bulk of the gift aid, followed by emergency aid and the various categorical programs, and then Cal Grant. This summary illustrates the importance of two things. One, making sure students apply for financial aid, because the financial aid can't be awarded and packaged unless the student applies. And on a related but tangent note, Cal Grant reform, also known as AB 1746, would increase the amount of Cal Grants that are included in community college student financial aid packages, which hopefully we can make that light blue part of the pie grow to make sure there's more money available to package students. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Anna Faye to go into more detail about the packaging process. Next slide, please.
Okay, well, before we get into financial aid packages, we'll define some financial aid terms. The cost of attendance component, which is also known as the budget, represents the school's estimate of the student's expenses for a specific period of enrollment, usually the school's academic year, usually what that would compose of fall and spring, or fall, spring, and summer. Now, the cost of attendance components include things such as tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, and miscellaneous expenses. Now, the EFC, which stands for Expected Family Contribution, measures the family's financial strength. This information is used by colleges to determine the amount of federal financial aid that student is eligible for. Now, just keep in mind that the EFC stays constant regardless of the type of college that the student plans to attend. Then we have the EFA, Estimated Financial Assistance, includes the types and forms of educational expenses that the student has received during the academic year. So that could be Pell Grant, Cal Grant, the fee waiver, loans. Then we have also the cost of, the school's cost of attendance. It's used to determine each student's eligibility for all sorts of financial aid, like grants and loans. The general rule in packaging is that the student's total financial aid and other estimated financial assistance must not exceed the student's financial need, because there are certain types of financial aid that is dependent on financial needs. So as financial administrators, we need to ensure that when we create packages or award certain programs, that the student does not meet that financial need after we take into account the cost of attendance and we subtract the EFC, which is the expected family contribution. So if we discover that the student has other estimated financial aid assistance, for example, scholarships, that could cause that the aid package to exceed the student's financial need, then we are required by regulation to adjust certain types of financial aid to eliminate that over award. The process of awarding aid without exceeding the student's financial need for need-based aid or cost of attendance is traditionally called packaging. Now, packaging is a process that varies from school to school, depending on the types of scholarship and other aid available at the school. And of course, the characteristics of the student population, because each of us may have different types of students. Schools may have different packaging philosophies as well, but they generally try to find the best combination of aid to meet the student's financial need. Now, let's see here. The next one, next slide, please. So general packaging rules. So the basic guideline to keep in mind when institutions establish their packaging policies is that the requirement is that they make campus-based funds reasonably available to all students throughout the academic year for their program of study. This means that a school may not exclude an otherwise eligible student or a category of students from consideration when a school packages campus-based aid. So like we mentioned earlier, we have to first determine the student's cost of attendance, or what we normally call the budget. Each of us, California community colleges, may have varying cost of attendance depending on the type of financial aid. For example, whether the student is living with parents, or if the student is a commuter, they're living away from campus. And later on, we'll show you some examples of that. Then we take into account the expected family contribution, and then we subtract the EFC from the cost of attendance. Then, of course, we have to award federal Pell Grant if the student is eligible. So that's the first thing that we normally award, is the federal Pell Grant, especially if the student is eligible for that. Then after we take into account the Pell Grant, then we calculate the student's remaining need for any type of what we call campus-based financial aid programs. So campus-based programs, which is usually determined by the student's financial need, are federal work study, subsidized loans, Pell Grants, or any other programs that is based on financial need. Next slide, please. Another basic packaging concept is the school's determined sequence for offering financial aid from various types of programs. By designating the order, the school is able to control its packaging outcomes. A school must follow its packaging sequence consistently within the categories of students that they have established. However, the sequence may vary from category to category. So for example, a school may have a category consisting of all recent high school graduates. Those usually are our freshmen, to whom it offers grant first, then take into account other financial aid programs like work study, but then they say, no loans. But it really depends on the school's packaging policy. Now, each of us will have our own packaging policy, and that's usually defined by the college. But the philosophy for California community colleges that we award grants first. So as much what we call free money as possible, right? That the student is eligible for before we award any type of need-based aid, such as student loans. So that's why it's important that students disclose or donors award scholarships as early as possible, so we can take into account all of those free money that the student is eligible for. And then later on, if there's still financial need or remaining need available, then the student might apply for certain need-based program, or what we call campus-based programs like federal work study or federal student loans. Next slide, please. A school also should set and follow guidelines for packaging the amounts. Now, each campus-based programs, as far as minimum and maximum amounts, vary from college to college. The total amount of aid offered to eligible students is determined by the school, as long as the amounts offered from each of those programs is within the applicable minimum and maximum limits, and also meet other program-specific requirements. So each of these federal programs or state programs have their own limits and criteria. So we have to keep that in mind. Also, if a student is eligible for federal Pell Grant, it is always considered the foundation of a financial aid package. So if the student is eligible for a Pell Grant, that will be the first thing that we award the student, and then followed by other grants the student is eligible for. For example, here in California, community colleges, we determine a student's eligibility for the California College Promise Grant, which we used to refer to as the fee waiver, which waives the student's enrollment fees. And then most of the time, we then will consider awarding the student a Cal Grant, depending on the type of Cal Grant that the student is eligible for. And also then we take into consideration all the other need-based aid. So now I think now my colleague Sean will discuss some scenarios of the different types of packages and scenarios of over awards. So take it away, Sean.
You, Anna Faye. All right, so now that we've looked at philosophies and the general guidelines for packaging and awarding, let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples that we have here for you, just so you have an understanding of how the California Community College system kind of works with packaging. As you can see, the sample package here is for a student living with parents. If you've attended any of the previous sessions with the UCs or the CSUs, you'll probably see our cost of attendance for community college is a lot lower. California community colleges tend to be very affordable for our students because we want to create that access so that way our students are able to attend college and get that degree that they want. So an example here is our cost of attendance is $15,719. We can see that based on the student's FAFSA application, we have an EFC of 0. So that student's remaining need is the $15,719. So the total cost of attendance for that college. Again, be aware cost of attendance is a combination of different factors that a school takes into account, that it would basically take a student to live, breathe, and eat for one full academic year. So this could vary from school to school depending on where the community college is located. But for this one today, this is the cost we're looking at. Now, as Anna Faye said earlier, if the student is eligible for federal Pell Grant funding, that is the base of our packaging. If a student is going to receive this funding, we start with that first when determining their financial need and awarding. Also, because we are a California community college system, we have the privilege of being able to use the California College Promise Grant. So as Anna Faye said before, this is a great source of funding that will allow students that receive this grant to have their tuition waived for the semester or the academic year if they attend for a full academic year and are eligible. Also, we're very lucky to be in California and be part of the California Cal Grant. Hello, I'm losing my train of thought here. The California Cal Grant program. With Cal Grant, students do have access to additional funding as California residents that they may not have in other states. So we would also use this since it is other grant aid that is awarded to students. Also, once we've applied that, this would create any unmet need for the student for any need-based aid. After that, we would then look at other campus-based aids such as the FSCOG or the supplemental grant that we would go ahead and apply to the student's award. And then of course, federal work-study programs. So these are two campus-based aid programs that if your school participates, you would have access to. After we've applied all of this aid, we see that the student now has a remaining need of $780. So again, we start with the cost of attendance at the top. As we apply the aid down the student's award package, with Pell Grant being the base of that aid package, we can see that now the student has enough funding to go ahead and cover most of their cost of attendance costs with the remaining need of $780. Next slide, please. Our next example would be a student away or off campus. So a student living on their own or living with friends, not necessarily living at home. We do know that cost of attendance would go up in this case, because students would be paying additional housing costs or food supplies or any personal expenses on their own, possibly without the assistance of their parents. So the cost of attendance for this student, we would be looking at $29,408. The student's expected family contribution number coming in from the FAFSA would be $2,500. So we're looking at a total remaining need of $26,908 for this student. So again, the student based on the FAFSA is eligible for the federal Pell Grant. That would be the base of the award. The student also qualifies for the Promise, so that would waive their tuition right there. And of course, the Cal Grant program as well. So total aid here would bring their cost of attendance or their unmet need down to $20,019. We would then go ahead and award the student the FSCOG grant, as well as a federal work-study award. After all aid has been applied, the student now has a remaining need of $14,419. So if we're able to find other subsidized need or any need-based aid, the student would still have eligibility for additional aid before turning to any unsubsidized aid. Next slide, please. For this student here, it works out a little different. We do have a student here, of course, away and off campus because the cost of attendance is at $29,000 as well, a little higher of an EFC. So we do know that based on this expected family contribution number here, no matter what state a student is in, this student would not be eligible for the federal Pell Grant. All right. This student's remaining need is $18,908. So we do know Pell Grant they would not be eligible for. However, just because our students may not be eligible for the federal Pell Grant, the benefit of having the California College Promise Grant is it's based off of different need criteria. So our student still could be eligible for this California College Promise Grant. This student is still receiving $1,196 in that grant. So this brings down their unmet need to $17,000. This student is also eligible for the Federal Work Study Program for an additional $5,000. And this student is choosing to borrow a direct student loan. Now, keep in mind, not all community colleges will automatically award student loans. If we can avoid trying to award student loans if students don't need them, that is always the goal at the California Community College. However, we do know that student loans are a real thing that students do need to borrow in order to fund their educational programs. So they are offered. Some schools will auto award them. Some schools will not. Students will need to request for them. This student has been awarded a $4,500 subsidized loan. So once all funding has been applied, the student still has a remaining need of $8,212. Again, any federal direct loans are only applied if the student requests them or your school is set up to auto package them, and that should be in your packaging and awarding policies. Next slide, please. Now this example has to deal with an over award for a student. So this student's cost of attendance, apparently the student is living at home because we have a lower cost of attendance at $15,719. This student has a 0 EFC, so they have a full amount that's eligible for financial need. This student is qualifying for federal Pell Grant because of the 0 EFC. They're also qualifying for their California College Promise and a Cal Grant award. So this brings down their unmet need to $6,380. The student is also receiving an FSCOG grant and a $5,000 federal work study, okay, which is leaving their need at $780. But then later on down the semester, we find out the student is now receiving a scholarship. Great for the student. A little more work for the financial aid office. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and apply that $1,000 to the student's unmet need, which now leaves the student in the negative of being over awarded $220. So per regulations, we can't have an over award. We need to keep the packaging within the student's original cost of attendance of $15,719. So what we're going to go ahead and do is reduce the student's federal work study award. Okay, so we're going to decrease that $5,000 federal work study award to $4,780 to go ahead and bring that student back into their cost of attendance remaining need. The reason we would do federal work study is, again, per federal regulations, we follow an order of return. So federal work study would automatically go back first. All other grant aid the student is eligible to keep, as well as their FSCOG grant. All right, because federal work study is a pay as you work or earn as you work, we would go ahead and return the funding from that so the student can keep their scholarship and still be within their cost of attendance. And I will turn back over to Gina.
Thank you so much, Sean and Anna Faye. So I just wanted to close this portion of the presentation. As Sean mentioned, financial aid is heavily regulated. But it is a critical lever in meeting the needs of our diverse student population. So financial aid offices have to balance the compliance to federal regulations while also building a sense of empowerment. We want financial aid offices to feel empowered to make campus level financial aid policies, including their packaging policies, as flexible as allowable by law. Financial aid directors, they know how vital financial aid is to student success, and they want to provide as full of packages to students as possible. Because full financial aid packages will help the system progress towards access and equity, as well as provide student groups that have faced barriers with increased career mobility while creating empowered learners and shifting access and navigation burdens away from students to the institutions. So that's our presentation today. Of course, you go to the next slide. It just says questions on the slide. But now this is a time for questions. So Mayor, do we have any questions in the chat?
We sure do. And thank you so much again, Gina, Sean, and Anafe. Super appreciate all of this valuable information. And for anyone wondering, we've confirmed that we will have this deck available to share with y'all as a PDF. Stay tuned for those great resources in the coming days. But we do have a few questions posted, and feel free to post additional questions, y'all. And if you would prefer to be unmuted, you can do that as well. But let's start with the first two that have come in. So first, regarding the Cal Grant, we hear two schools of thought. Yes, accept Cal Grant at the community colleges before transfer, since it's available for 4 years and helps with living expenses. But then also no, save it for when you transfer to the 4-year. What is the philosophy when awarding aid, and what guidance might you offer as folks negotiate these two options? Looks like Anafe, you've unmuted if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, sure. And probably Sean can chime in as well. So for the Cal Grant program, there is a maximum lifetime eligibility of 400%. So each 100% represents a 1 year of full-time enrollment. So if a student starts at a community college, what we normally do is we counsel students that they could accept that Cal Grant while at a community college, but limit it to just 2 years, up to 200%, because they would need that extra 200% or the remaining 200% when they transfer to a university. Because most oftentimes, while we have, affordable costs, students still may need those additional funds while going to school. So the Cal Grant program could assist in their other educational expenses like books and supplies and transportation, because usually the California Promise Grant already pays for their enrollment fees. There is really no tuition component at a community college. We don't have tuition, but we have enrollment fees, and that's the California Promise program would pay for that if the student qualifies. So what we normally do is we counsel students to, yes, save it, but again, we look at the percentage. We always say once you reach your 200% already used up or remaining of 200%, we counsel them to please save that, because when you transfer to a university, that will be converted to a tuition component, and that would pay for their tuition. Sean, did you need to add something also on that?
So I would agree with that as well. My students specifically at my school use a student self-service portal. So with ours, we have the disclaimer next to the Cal Grant awards themselves, letting students know that especially if they're receiving the federal Pell Grant and the California Promise, unless they're really needing the funding, it's recommended to save it, because especially with the Cal Grant B, they're going to receive a lot more at a university or a CSU when they transfer than they would at a California community college. Although it's great for a lot of our students, especially students here. I have a lot of students on my campus that use Cal Grant B and C, but it's not required for all students. There's a lot of students that get other funding that are perfectly fine with their financial aid awarding package. So our self-service portal allows them to either accept or deny that aid based on what the student is comfortable with.
And if I can just add one thing, I completely agree with both what Anafe and Sean added, but it is definitely, there should not be a one size fits all when advising students whether to use their Cal Grant or to reserve it till they get to the university. So important to look at the individual students, their financial aid, their award package, and also take into consideration their goals as well. So like I said, I just want to make sure that it's never, and it's how it is at all the colleges, it's never a one size fits all.
Thank you, Anafe and Sean, for your kind of local examples, and also for that reminder, Gina. That's super helpful. The next question that we have is, can you talk about how the sequence of packaging would change if the student attends a community college with a Promise program that gives free tuition to residents like Free City at CCSF, which I think is San Francisco. Whoever would like to take that first, maybe Gina?
Yeah, sure, I can start with that. So the Promise programs, and this is throughout the state, many colleges have Promise programs that offer free tuition. Generally, what happens is if the student is not eligible for the California College Promise Grant or our fee waiver, and they have a Promise program that pays the fees, then they are essentially still giving the student a fee waiver. It's just kind of has a separate name. So it still falls in the same sequence that Sean had gone over. If the student is eligible for a Pell Grant, they'll award the Pell Grant and then the fee waiver, whether it be the Promise Grant or the specific Promise program at the school. So it generally does not affect the awarding sequence at all.
Good point there, Gina, because here I'm from the Los Angeles Community College District, and we call our Promise program the LA College program. So while we name it differently, it's still the same Promise program.
And just to throw something out there as well too, and I know that this wasn't in any of our examples as well too, but we may have some students or others that are inquiring about it later on, is if students are receiving any type of veterans benefits, and they're utilizing those at any of the schools, veterans benefits don't count against a student's estimated financial assistance in their award packaging. So it's not going to limit the amount of other awards that students may still be eligible. So, I mean, you could get your VA benefits and get your tuition covered and still be eligible for the Pell Grant.
Good point. Yes, we do have we encourage all our veterans to apply for financial aid because it does not affect their financial aid packages at all.
That's such great information. Thank you again. We did have another question come in, and we do have time, everybody. So if you have more questions, we're already receiving really great ones. Feel free to add some more. And if we don't have any more questions, we'll just end the webinar early. So be sure to use this time. All right, this third question, can you talk more about the Student Success Completion Grant? Do all community colleges offer this? And do all students have access to it if they meet specific criteria, such as full-time attendance or GPA? Anafe, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to take that first?
Sure. Yes, so the Student Success Completion Grant, the eligibility for that would be the student must be receiving a Cal Grant, some sort of Cal Grant. So once a student receives a Cal Grant and they meet the unit requirement, they have to be full-time, then if there is funding available, again, because this is limited in funding, we only get an allocation from the state, then the student will be awarded what we call SSCGs. So for my college, for example, we have utilized our SSCG after fall semester. There's no more allocation, even though we still have might have a lot of students to be eligible for it based on their eligibility for the Cal Grant and the units. So yes, we do all, I believe you all participate, and it's all allocated by the state.
I just want to confirm, yes, every college, all 115 community colleges do receive Student Success Completion Grant funding to allocate out to students. And as Anafe mentioned, it is limited, meaning that not all eligible, there's more eligible students than there is funding. And of course, every year, as part of the Chancellor's Office, we do always request additional funding to make sure all eligible students are able to receive an award.
Thank you for that, and great question. We do have another one that was sent to me privately. I just posted it to the full group. Do foster care funds affect a prior foster youth's aid? And whoever's willing to take that first, looks like Anafe.
Well, for foster youth, they have other types of financial aid in addition to, let's say, the Pell Grant. We have the CHAFE, which is another type of state financial aid programs. And I believe the maximum amount on that is $5,000. And now starting this, in the middle of this academic year, the Cal Grant amount for foster youth has actually increased to $6,000. So when you say affect priors, foster youth aid, I guess I would say it will depend on the student's prior year's income, right? So again, the eligibility for the Pell Grant or even the Cal Grant is based on income and assets. So, but most of the time though, our foster youth are eligible for Pell Grant, California College Promise, Cal Grant, Chafee. And now, like I said, the foster youth now has an increased Cal Grant of $6,000. Gina, you want to add something to that?
No, I was just, the only thing I would add is, and also depends on the source of the foster care funds. Is the money coming from the college, or is it coming directly from, it's usually the county or the Department of Social Services if they're providing the funds. So it does depend, but in a lot of cases, yes, it will. It gets counted as part of their financial aid package.
Thank you for that, Gina. Anna Nafe, we don't have any other questions, but do any of these questions lift up any other last insights y'all would like to share before we close out this presentation, either from the Chancellor's office or from the campus level? Go ahead, Gina.
So I just wanted to reiterate, and there was a slide in the beginning about the I Can Go to College website. It's such a valuable resource for both students, families, for financial aid staff and non-financial aid staff that are assisting students with the financial aid process. It is, and the one thing, if you forget anything and you only remember one thing, I don't know if we necessarily said it, but students must apply for financial aid. It is, they should never count themselves out or assume that they aren't eligible. It is so important that they submit that application. Even if they have questions, all of our financial aid offices have either the director or their staffs available to help students complete the application, answer questions. There's lots of help that can be found on the icangotocollege.com website as well.
Thank you so much for that, Gina. And would everybody just take a moment? You can use your Zoom reactions to just share with our panel your appreciation for all this great information. There are even some definitions I just got caught up, got reminded what those terms really mean. I've been in this work for 15 years. So I'm so appreciative. Gina, Sean, and Anafe, thank you so much. I hope you're seeing that love in the chat. Before we close out, everybody, just a reminder again to please complete our exit ticket. I'll put that link in the chat. Please be sure to complete that. Let our panel know how they did today. And you'll also be entered into a raffle, thanks to partners we have like Gap, who've provided some great swag for our attendees. Last call, any other tips from our panel before we close out?
The only thing I would have left to say is do whatever you can as a college to post on your websites, communications out to your school, out to your students, to let them know to advocate for any special circumstances your students may have. The FAFSA does not reflect, for a lot of students in their households, an accurate representation of how households are currently supporting themselves, especially in times like this. So please do your best to get this information out to your students, empower your students to advocate for themselves for special circumstances to the financial aid offices, and make us aware of those circumstances so that we can best equip you with the tools and the necessary guidance on presenting you with the most rewarding financial aid package that we can.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sean. And as Gina said as well, please encourage students to apply for financial aid. I've heard a lot of students say, well, I don't think I qualify, but in reality, they actually would qualify, even if it's just the California Promise Grant, right? It's just waiving your fees. So instead of paying the $46 a unit, waiving those fees could help out a lot financially on the student. So because once they have applied to our college, sometimes they may not apply right away, and it just delays their financial aid packaging, and they may lose out on some of the campus-based aid that he or she might have been eligible for. So the earlier that they submit that FAFSA or California Dream application, the better. And because again, I think I forgot to mention that some of these campus-based aid like FSEOG and work study, those are limited in funding. So while we award that to some of our students, there's still quite a bit of students that may not be eligible for that. That's why we encourage students to also apply for scholarships, right? So free money as possible, right? Up front, yes.
Thank you so much for those last insights. And everyone, just a reminder, we do have a few last sessions this Thursday, so please check that out. And again, just please fill out the exit ticket. We want to say thank you to all of our wonderful presenters. We're so grateful to our partners and supporters, especially the California Community Colleges, the UC, Cal State, Immigrants Rising, and MoneyThink. Thank you so much again, Anafe, Sean, and Gina, and for all of you who have attended today. We'll see you at the next webinar. Have a great rest of your day.